Rogue Core Critique. Hi, welcome to a Rogue Core Critique video. I wanted to make this video for some time, but I wanted to play the game a lot more first, just to get a good grasp at it, to fully experience like what it has to offer, at least for now. And as this recording, I have roughly 40 hours in the game. I have all the achievements, and I've sent each character at least once. So I feel now is a good time to finally share my thoughts on this game. So I think it's really stupid when people make a review after like having played 2 hours or something or whatever. So I really wanted to take my time with this game, so I'm sorry about the delay. I tried to go into everything with an open mind, and suffice it to say, even though I enjoyed this game quite a lot, it's far from perfect. It is still an early access game, and Ghost Ship needs feedback, so here we are. And just for additional context, I have roughly 1600 hours in DRG. I played a multitude of both roguelikes and roguelites. I did not get access to Rogue Core's closed playtests, so I started playing the game after early access release, like many others. And lastly, the majority of my playtime is on depth 4 with randoms, and all the clips you see in this video are of that as well. So that being said, let's begin. One of the biggest complaints players gave after release was that the timer wasn't a fun mechanic. I personally enjoy the timer quite a lot, and to me, it's just my theory by the way, it seems like the majority of players that aren't having fun with the timer is due to them not having any respect for the timer or understanding how it works. So let me explain the way I see it. The purpose of the timer is to pressure the player into being efficient, and it forces you to constantly ask yourself, do we actually have time for this? Even the dwarves themselves ask this question when they ping Expenite.
Do we have time to mine that Expenite?
The name of the game is time management.
Actually, the name is Rogue Core.
So, when I see people say that Rogue Core has an identity crisis because of the timer, I don't think I could disagree more. The argument that Rogue Core's timer forces you to be fast, but the game actively punishes you for being fast, I don't think makes any sense at all. The timer is there to pressure you into being efficient, right? And for some people, yes, that means crumbling under the pressure, panicking and rushing everything. But for others, it means to carefully approach a game with efficiency in mind, which means, for example, to strategically skip certain events if they are deemed too risky, or leaving early instead of greeding for resources. I think it will always be better to leave resources behind and live another day, than to instead risk getting overwhelmed and lose the entire mission. So my point is, the way I see it, the timer punishes greed, not being fast, alright? So, in my most humble opinion, that is nothing more than a skill issue. Now, with that being said, I do assume that the majority of players that struggle with the timer aren't necessarily struggling because of greed, rather due to not being fast enough for the game's pace. And Ghost Ship seems to have addressed that, as they're adding a way to change the pressure of the timer in the next update. So casual players can play on a less intense timer, and hardcore players can play on a more intense timer with better rewards. This, hopefully, is just a win-win for everyone, and it just sounds like a good addition to the game. Great. Me personally, I think the timer is fun. I like it. To me, the timer forces me to think about this game differently than DRG. Everything I do suddenly becomes a race against the clock. Everything I choose to do as a consequence. Spending time doing this activity leaves less time for this activity later. I can choose to greed for resources if I want, but by doing that I might risk losing the entire mission. So the timer does make Rogue Core more intense than Deep Rock, but that's the point. Rogue Core is supposed to be more intense than Deep Rock, that's why the enemies look scarier, why the dwarves are more serious, why the music is more sinister. Rogue Core might take place on the same god-forsaken planet, but we're not miners anymore. And yeah, that's what I have to say about the timer. I think the Reaper Worms are really cool, they add a lot of oh shit factor to the game. I've heard rumors that some people have had Reaper Worms spawn inside important objectives like the drive unit for the elevator. That's never happened to me, personally, but that sounds horrible, and it sounds like a bug, honestly, if that's the case. So, Ghost Ship, please fix. Now the circle. The god-forsaken circle. I really tried to go into this mechanic with an open mind, but having now played the game for roughly 40 hours, the majority of games being on depth 4, with multiple level 150s, mind you, there's always, and I mean always, at least one completely clueless teammate that wanders off on their own, forcing the rest of the team to catch up if they want to pick upgrades. This mechanic currently serves no purpose except to just waste time in a game where time management is really important, alright? Which is why I'm happy to say Ghost Ship is removing this mechanic in next updates, as you might know already. But oh boy, I for one could not be happier. That thing was just such a time waster, it was so annoying. And as for negotiations, I've seen a lot of people being upset with this mechanic, where teammates have to share who gets what upgrades, but I personally haven't had much trouble with this feature. Regardless, Ghost Ship is changing how negotiations work in the upcoming updates, where now upgrades will be replaced with a new upgrade of the same tier if they get claimed. So even though I didn't have much issue with this old system, this new system just sounds so much better, and is hopefully another win-win for everyone. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. The Circle was mine and many other players' biggest complaint about this game, and Ghost Ship are removing it very soon. Great. Okay, this is the last of the big three things that people were complaining about on release. The ammo economy. The ammo economy in Rogue Core is currently based on your ammo enhancements, a few niche upgrades, your biodex, but most importantly, how many munition crates that spawn on each floor, which is completely RNG, by the way. So on this current version of the game, I have surprisingly often been running low on ammo for no other reason than the game not spawning enough munitions crates on the current floor. When I first notice I'm running low, I'll check to see where the closest munitions crate is, and more often than not, it's either in a different cave or there simply are none left, like there's just no more. This alone has certainly ended a few of my runs, and it just feels kind of unfair, because, I mean, what am I supposed to do? There have been situations where there's just not enough ammo to deal with the amount of enemies on depth 4. So therefore, ammo enhancements felt almost like just mandatory to equip. But now, with this next update, once again, Ghost Ship are adding an extra munitions crate to each floor. So that's another win for the Rogue Core player base. Yeah, this extra munitions crate was sorely needed. And me personally, when I lose in this game, I want to lose because I felt like it was my fault, alright? I want to lose because I either got overwhelmed by too many enemies, I didn't use my class abilities well, or because I didn't pay attention to my ammo. Basically, yeah, me not playing well. I don't want it to be because the next munitions crate spawned 2 caves away and there's nowhere to get to it. But yeah, again, not much to say here. Ghost Ship is working on things, so let's now get into the real meat of this video, right? That was the 3 big things that people were complaining about. I just wanted to mention it, but now let's get into the real meat. I don't think it's controversial to say that the thing that sets a good roguelike apart from a great one is variety. Variety is like what roguelikes are known for, in my opinion. And I think Rogue Core currently struggles with that. While Rogue Core certainly has options, there's currently a huge lack of weapons and upgrades to choose from. You will most likely see some of the same weapons or upgrades almost every run. You might also see many of the same mining constructions every run, maybe even the same Expenite Events too. The foundational groundwork is there, it just needs more to it. So I think for longevity's sake, improving run variety should be the highest priority for Rogue Core's development. Variety is like the roguelike genre's biggest asset, it is its greatest strength. I think Rogue Core's variety alone is what will decide whether the game lasts 1 year or 5 years. It is that important. Now that being said, it seems Ghost Ship is already acutely aware of this, as they've clearly illustrated on their first roadmap. In the first update, they're adding 2 new weapons, a new flying enemy, and more mining constructions. All great features that will likely add greater variety to the game. There's lots of room to add new content there. They could add more weapons, they could add more grenades, utility tools, enemies, bosses, mining constructions, Expenite events, risk vectors, enhancements, clearance levels, and more. Ghost Ship has designed Rogue Core in a very constructive way, much like Deep Rock in Early Access 2, where they could just pile more and more content on top of the foundation they've already built here. So it does look very promising, that's what I'm trying to say, pretty much. And I've seen some people complain about the cave generation in this game, it being more linear than Deep Rock's. But I think for such a time-sensitive and combat-focused game, I think the linearity is completely justified. I can't recall a single instance in my 40 hours where I wanted the caves to be more complex than what they already were. More complex caves just means they'll be more difficult to traverse, which means more time spent traversing them, which means less time for other more productive activities, like doing objectives or mining expenites. So yeah, I think cave generation is fine, the game just needs more variety to like everything else. Variety, extremely important in a game like this. So I hope Ghost Ship will add more stuff to it. It seems like they're already doing it, so it's a good thing. I think currently some of Roguecore's Expenite events are not worth the time risk. First one that comes to mind is the Ram Hammer. Now the Ram Hammer is an event that requires all 4 players to be standing inside a small circle surrounding it, escorting it through a tunnel while it slowly charges up, while also defending yourselves against a swarm. I say it requires 4 players because it moves substantially slower based on how many teammates are absent from the circle. So if you're struggling to complete the event, the Ram Hammer grinds to a halt and you suddenly have an infinite swarm on your hands. So because of that, I rarely feel it's worth to actually do this event. For all the hard work you're putting in, for all the time you're spending, the teammates have to do their part, and for the overall huge risk that you're taking, you get a single Expenite nodule, which is worth 250 Expenites. I mean, what? What is this? You might think I'm asking for a bit much here, but let's compare this event to, say, the pipe connection event, alright? Arguably the easiest event in the whole game. You plug in some pipes into this container thingy, you wait like 10 seconds, and boom, there we have it. It's the same reward. It's the same reward, guys. It's the exact same thing. I just don't get it, alright? Call me a greedy softbeard or whatever, but this shit isn't right. Don't get me wrong, I like the Ram Hammer event aesthetically. Slingshotting a massive hammer into a giant chunk of Expenite is badass. I just think the reward is kind of lackluster. Lackluster? Okay, whatever. I need to mention the Geode excavation event. And you might think, oh, that doesn't sound so bad, you know? Well, you're wrong, alright? You're wrong. This event is cursed, alright? Every time I see this event, my teammates just turn off their brains and start digging for geodes, even if you have a swarm coming in the next 20 seconds or so. This has happened to me on multiple occasions with several different teammates of varying player levels, from level 10s to like level 150s. I'm not even joking. Like, take a look at this clip, for example. We have about 1 minute left before we reach critical danger level. So I decide it's time to head for the elevator, right? But look at what my teammates are doing. They just really want those geodes. So I decide to wait for them before I start the elevator in a frail attempt to give them as much time as possible. But they still just want those damn geodes, man. So I finally decide, maybe it's time to hit the elevator button so we don't lose the entire mission? Maybe? And then, out of all the geodes they could have possibly found, they find the one with a swarm in it. They both go down within 10 seconds of the swarm arriving, in a separate cave from the one I am in, by the way. So I now find myself in a situation where I have to fend for myself against 2 swarms and Reaper worms closing in on all sides. Teammates, man. Sometimes they do you dirty. Mind you, these teammates played really well until I found this event. It's almost like the event itself put like a entrancing spell or something on my teammates. They just had to go for those geodes, man. And I somehow managed to clutch through this situation and rescue my teammates on the next floor, but listen to the confusion in my voice as I descended down the elevator. Please. Get in! Get in! That was so fucking close, and that was so greedy of them. I don't know what they were doing. They were trying to go for geodes when we had like 2 seconds left. Should I have stayed with them? I don't know. Should I risk the entire mission? Should we have held the worms off while we had like a double swarm going on? I don't know how else right there, by the way. I have no clue. Great news is more than half of them are swarming us. Bad news is the next level might suck. Like, I still don't know what I would have done here, or what I should have done differently. Now, these 2 events aren't even the most difficult, as that certainly goes to the secure container event by far. This one is much like the Ram Hammer in that you and all of your teammates have to stand inside a small circle, defending yourselves while waiting for a progress bar to fill up. Now, this progress bar of this event fills up in an excessively long amount of time, and much like the Ram Hammer event, if you're struggling to complete it, you suddenly have an infinite swarm on your hands. And you still get the same reward! So even though these nodules are worth 250 Expenites, I believe these specific events are not worth the risk currently. When people are skipping events just out of sheer dread that the mission might spiral out of control, I think something needs to change, something needs to be done about this. And I'm still kind of on the fence about this, but as I said, these events currently have such a huge risk factor to them that the only time we're gonna do them is under completely ideal conditions. Or if you have a teammate that just like presses buttons when no one is ready. It's sort of a, if you're already winning, then you win more kind of situation. If you're struggling with your run, then these events are likely out of the question. Just out of the question. So I would like to see some better rewards out of these events. I've seen a lot of people say that for a game labeling itself as a roguelite, ROCOR has a surprisingly lacking amount of meta progression, and I gotta say, while meta progression isn't everything a roguelite is known for, I fully agree that ROCOR's meta progression is lacking. As it stands right now, we only have enhancements, which took me roughly 40 hours to unlock each of the highest tier. We have bio booster decks, which only require you to ascend each character at least once, also done in less than 40 hours. And we have the clearance levels gained through gathering intel. Currently there's 9 in the game. That's pretty much it. Yeah, you could say that gathering cosmetics is part of the meta progression, but cosmetics don't add anything meaningful to the gameplay. So I feel like there's something lacking here, there should be something more here. I also think ROCOR being a co-op game means it's important to design the game in a way so that players of any progression level can play with each other. If not, you end up splitting the player base into small factions based on how far they progress through the game. That might be something Ghost Ship is prioritizing, or it might not, but regardless, due to the nature of this game being co-op, I imagine it can be quite difficult to design ROCOR with a roguelite fashion in mind. Maybe that's why the current meta progression is lacking. Having said that, I think it would be really neat for ROCOR to have some sort of progression where, say, you unlock a new weapon by beating a boss a certain number of times, maybe this certain area, maybe kill this enemy a bunch, ascend this character, die a certain number of times, it could be anything. But as I said, I think ROCOR's current meta progression is pretty lackluster. I assume Ghost Ship will flesh out the system more with time, but currently, it needs some work. It's a lot of work. And don't get me wrong, I like the enhancements a lot, I think they're cool, but the game just needs something more. Currently, there are 5 playable characters in the game, and I say currently because Ghost Ship has stated that they're planning on adding more characters in the future, as, quote, ROCOR isn't necessarily balanced over 4 distinct classes, like in DRG. And those 5 characters are Guardian, Spotter, Slicer, Falconer, and Retcon. I've heard differing opinions on the Reclaimers, but me personally, I think the Reclaimers are really well designed. On their own, they all feel distinctly different from one another, and compared to DRG's Dwarves, they really stand out as being more serious and elite, while still having that goofy charm to them, which I think was Ghost Ship's intention. When it comes to gameplay, the characters are everything. On their own, they will have unique abilities that play into certain roles or playstyles, but they get a random assortment of weapons, grenades, and upgrades every run. Some characters are better built for team support, while others are naturally better at pure damage dealing. Guardian, for example, who was the first character I played, is a very team-oriented crowd control character, due to being able to repel enemies away from him, and stun them with his concussive blast ability. His shield regen field also helps support his teammates, which makes him really good at defending objectives, like the elevator drive units. I've seen people say that Guardian is the weakest character in the game, but he can definitely come in clutch in certain situations. Now, I'm not going to talk about every character, but I will say that there are characters that feel less team-oriented than others, namely Slicer and Retcon. Why is that? It's because Slicer and Retcon are the only characters that don't have an ability that affects other teammates, besides just helping out killing enemies. Guardian has a shield regen field that any teammate can take use of. And the same goes for Falconer, she has a field that makes any teammate's weapon deal electric damage while they stand inside of it, and her drone can revive teammates from a distance. Spotter can highlight enemies in front of him with his scan ability, and mark high priority targets with his crit darts so that they take more damage. He even has his own resupply that either he or his teammates can use. So these characters all help each other out in more ways than just killing enemies, while Slicer and Retcon do not. Slicer and Retcon are both pretty self-sufficient and independent characters. Slicer's dash ability alone makes him extremely agile, almost like a mini grappling hook from DRG, while his iconic Slice ability is good at dealing damage. I'd argue his dash is actually his most powerful ability. It allows him to dodge enemies, negate fall damage, and get to high ledges. He is genuinely the scout of this game. Seriously, it gives me scout vibes. I'm not just saying that because of the voice, alright? In DRG, I feel like most of my clueless teammates are always playing scout. In ROCOR, they're playing Slicer. I don't know what it is about these characters, but new players seem to love this kind of lone wolf playstyle. But despite his shortcomings as a teammate, he is undoubtedly the most consistently powerful character in the game, in my opinion. He's actually the most played character in the game according to Steam achievements too. His mobility alone makes him a great pick for keeping any run alive. Now Retcon. Retcon is the least played character in ROCOR, also according to Steam achievements. While she certainly has the potential to be really powerful, I feel the reasons she is so unpopular is because she has a substantially lower skill floor than the other reclaimers, in my opinion. It might be too early to say, but I think Retcon will become the driller of this game, in the sense that Driller, in my opinion, is the hardest character to learn out of the 4 DRG dwarves, and similarly in Rogue Core, she has a kind of weird kit that requires you to think outside the box. I tried using your rewind ability, depositing Expenite, hoping it would reset, but it didn't. Your ammo, grenades, health and armor do reset, however, which quickly led me to discover the power of animation cancelling your grenades. What you can do is use your time rewind ability, then spam all of your grenades in quick succession, then rewind to get all your grenades back. And if you add a few ability cooldown upgrades, you can do this every 10 seconds or so. This alone makes for an extremely powerful and consistent combo that you can do pretty much every run, depending on your grenades. Just watch out for your slicer running into the enemies they're bombarding. See, I told you he has scout energy. Now, I've seen people say that the reclaimers don't feel as complementary as DRG's dwarves, but honestly, I can't really understand why. I haven't really been able to feel a difference. It seems like the argument is that the reclaimers don't have the same amount of synergies that the DRG dwarves have. However, the thing that made the DRG dwarves synergize to begin with was their traversal tools. And those same traversal tools are also present in Rogue Core, but the reclaimers also have their own, unique class-based abilities. So I would actually argue the reclaimers complement each other more than the DRG dwarves. And like I said, Ghostship has said they're planning to add more playable characters in the future, which means more bio booster decks too. And speaking of that, I'm just going to discuss the bio booster decks in this segment too, because I don't know where else to put it. I think the bio boosters are a really cool mechanic, but some of the decks are almost useless. They're just borderline useless. Slicer's Carnage deck is undoubtedly the most powerful and versatile deck in the entire game. It requires very little setup besides just killing enemies, and that's pretty much the whole deck. Killing enemies gives you damage, reduces cooldown, gives you stone skin, and refunds ammo. Super powerful, always useful, no matter what you're playing. Compare this to Falconer's Storm deck. Extremely situational, only triggers when electric damage is present on the field, and is much harder to use effectively, even on Falconer. The point I'm trying to make is that some bio decks are insanely powerful, while others are situationally strong. And I think most players are gonna just pick whatever is more consistently powerful. So I wish Ghostship would tweak some of these less consistent decks to make them easier to build around for variety's sake. Because I really don't want to have to see like Carnage every run on every player that can equip it. But that's the reality, that's what's happening. And I would like to see more decks being used than just like the most powerful decks in the game. So I wish they were more equal, all of them. But yeah, again, the Reclaimers are great, their voice lines are great, their more serious vibe easily distinguishes them from DRG's dwarves, and I feel they have their own identity in Rogue Core. Now the music in Rogue Core slaps, absolutely. It slaps as hard as the DRG soundtrack, while sounding distinctly different, giving Rogue Core a new sense of identity while still feeling oddly familiar. It's much more sinister and gloomy compared to DRG, reflective of the borderline suicide missions a lot of these reclaimers embark on. I've been listening to the soundtrack through writing this entire script for this video, and I've just started to love it more and more. Soundtrack, solid, really solid. Now when it comes to sound design, I think good sound design is a very overlooked part of game development in general, and I believe sound design alone is able to tell you whether you're playing a good game or a great game. And Ghostship is no stranger to sound design, as DRG has lots of distinct enemy sounds to help the player distinguish what threats are present on the battlefield. I'm happy to say that the Rogue Core has taken the same approach, where all enemies emit easily identifiable sounds, always indicating to the player what threats you need to look out for. Now, with that being said, I have unfortunately noticed that a lot of Rogue Core's sound effects often get drowned out by each other, resulting in commonly getting ambushed by, for example, silent Corespawn, or even teammates not yelling for help after getting grabbed by a leech. I'm also starting to believe this to be a bug, because I've also had instances where I shoot teammates accidentally and I don't shout their friendly fire voice lines. So yeah, Ghostship, please fix. But yeah, music is amazing, sound design is amazing. The sound design just needs some fine-tuning on the volume levels. I've saved this chapter for last, because it is arguably the biggest part of this video. I've been genuinely baffled seeing the reception that this game got on release. And before I say anything else, I need to preface this. I'm not here to start drama or anything, I'm not here to flame people, but I really am genuinely confused as to what Rogue Core's player base was expecting with the release of this game in the first place. It goes back to everything I mentioned before, the fact that people didn't like the timer, that they thought the game was too hard or imbalanced, that the upgrades were boring, that the game feels uninspired. This game is literally the night train of Deep Rock. I mentioned this at the end of my first video too, but Rogue Core is getting the exact same treatment that Night Train got on release as well. Elden Ring players saw Night Train, wanted to give the game a try, without realizing Night Train is a much more demanding game than Elden Ring. So a lot of unprepared players got stomped by the game, and then left a negative review saying it was the game's fault. That, in my opinion, is one of those situations where you have to ask yourself, is it the game that's at fault, or am I just not the target audience? To me, this is a trend I'm starting to see more and more in gaming today. Players see a game they think they'll like, they jump into it without really knowing what they're getting themselves into, they get stomped, and then they demand that the game needs to change for them. While there certainly are people out there that have completely valid criticisms against Rogue Core, I also believe a large portion of the negative reviews on Steam are people that didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And that's what I mean by the DRG community doesn't understand Rogue Core, because DRG has a very casual player base, right? And Rogue Core is a very intense game, so of course there's gonna be a clash there. I've even seen a reviewer call out Ghost Ship for trying to do damage control prior to Rogue Core's early access release with this post. But the way I see it, they're just trying to inform people on what Rogue Core is, and isn't. Like it literally says right there in the title of the blog post, by the way. Of course, Ghost Ship knows that the majority of DRG's fanbase are casual players. Most games are. But I wouldn't fault them for trying to inform their players about what they're getting themselves into. Night Train did the same too. Bandai Namco made a bunch of official guides to help steer players in the right direction on how to play the game. Is that damage control to them? What about Ghost Ship having the same info on the game's store page? To me it just sounds like they knew that DRG's player base is very different from Rogue Core's player base, and they try to manage expectations. So to me it begs the question, did people actually expect DRG 2? It sure seems like it. Did people expect a finished game? Also seems like it. Are there people out there that have valid criticisms against the game while simultaneously being able or not being able to enjoy the game for what it is right now? Yes, of course. The only thing I want people to understand is that Rogue Core is not some formulaic evolution of DRG. Rogue Core is Rogue Core. It's taken the core gameplay of DRG and twisted it into something different, something new, just like how Night Train had reinvented Elden Ring's gameplay. If people fail to understand that, I think that's on them. Now, having said that, there's also another side to this, however. Out of the people I've seen that are disappointed with Rogue Core, there are some that seem especially disappointed by the fact that DRG was essentially put on life support in order for Ghost Ship to develop this game. In a way, DRG had to die for this game to flourish. And for some people, Rogue Core was worth that, it was worth the wait. But for others, like I said, it was extremely disappointing. After I was finished with my first session of Rogue Core, I stated that I was glad that this game was a result of DRG being put on hold for so many years, that I was satisfied with what the game had to offer. I thought then, and I still think, that Rogue Core is a fun game, but seeing these reviews do make me wonder, what would DRG have looked like if Ghost Ship never started working on Rogue Core? In reality, I think that Ghost Ship would have most likely worked on something else entirely in that case, regardless. DRG is a finished game at this point, it has hundreds if not thousands of hours of content to offer, and Rogue Core is something new, something fresh. I think that's reason enough for Ghost Ship to want to work on this game, but it simultaneously seems like a lot of players feel betrayed by Ghost Ship's absence from DRG. To the players that are disappointed by this, I want to say, I kinda felt the same way, back when I had earned my final promotion in DRG. Shortly after that video, I made a follow-up video talking about the post-game that DRG had to offer. I mentioned how 1300 hours into the game, I wasn't having fun anymore. And I tried to show off other negative reviews having the same belief, but I was quickly called out for misunderstanding the game and being ungrateful for all those 1300 hours I had played. And I agreed with them, and I still do. I realized it was stupid and entitled of me to play a game for 1300 hours and then say it needed something more, when in reality, I simply just didn't have fun with it anymore. If you're one of the people disappointed by Ghost Ship's absence from DRG, ask yourself this: have you gotten your fill out of DRG? Are there more things left for you to do? If there are, then go do those things. And if not, then how many hours did it take for you to get there? For me, I had grown so attached to the game that it was hard for me to let go. I was genuinely saddened by it, but for the amount of content I got to enjoy, based on the price I paid, Ghost Ship gave me a hell of a good deal, and they delivered a gaming experience I hold very dearly, and that I will never forget. DRG was genuinely a huge part of my life, but all things must come to an end eventually. And now, it's time for something new. Also, it's not like the game's dead, you can still play it however much you like. I'm just being hyperbolic for the sake of dramatic effect, guys, okay? Rogue Core reminds me when I first played DRG in Early Access back in 2018. DRG was fun, but very bare bones, and Ghost Ship quickly fleshed out the game with new features and content, everywhere. Ghost Ship proved to me, back then, that they take game development and player feedback very seriously, and I don't see why Rogue Core has to be any different in that regard. The foundational groundwork for a good game is here, but Ghost Ship just needs more time to nurture it further. I do have high hopes for this game, as I had high hopes for DRG in Early Access as well. Thanks for watching.